Good afternoon. I'm coming to you from Bonclarken in Flat Rock, North Carolina, and I wanted to bring my midweek message to our congregation from here. I had a Presbytery meeting today up at Bonclarken, and I couldn't help but pause and reflect and think about some things that the Lord's been teaching me and how I've been trying to put them into practice and how I want to encourage our congregation. You know, it says in Matthew 28 verse 19, "Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations." And many of you know the Greek word there translated nations is ethne, which focuses primarily on ethnic groups. And in our church, we've been praying about and thinking through how can we, as a church that's actually totally a white congregation, how can we reach out into our communities and reach people of other ethnic backgrounds? To that end, I've been trying to make this focus personal to me as well. And so to take the message seriously, go therefore, I am trying to go. You know, Jesus crossed the lines all the time. He crossed the lines of theological barriers set up by his own people. He crossed ethnic lines where the Jews were not supposed to meet with or speak to Samaritans. Jesus would go to the parties of people like Levi, who was trying to reach other people for the gospel. Jesus would speak to women, oftentimes in cultural settings where that was not permissible. Jesus kept crossing the lines, and I think he's challenging me and us to do the same, to cross lines in a good way. And so this week I went to a local restaurant called Hickory Tavern, and to order a to-go meal you have to go to the bar. And so I placed my order for my wife, and I was sitting there waiting for the meal to be prepared, and I sent out a few texts, read some emails, and then 3 seats down from me I couldn't help but notice that I'm in a situation where there's an African American man who's just sitting at the bar having a drink and just watching the screen, one of many screens that you can watch at the Hickory Tavern. Well, anyway, the Lord, I believe, prompted me to put actions to the words that I myself have been speaking. So I awkwardly slid over a couple of stools over and introduced myself to this man, and I said, you know, can I bother you for a minute? I just want to ask you a question. And the question I asked him was, what is your perspective on the black and white relations in America? He was kind of stunned by the question at first, and then he began to open up about it, because I told him, I'm a Christian, I was a pastor in the church, and I'm just trying to understand these things better myself. And that seemed to open the door, the channel for conversation. And he talked a long time. You know, one of the things he spoke about, he's originally from near Aiken, South Carolina, and he grew up in an area that was, you know, had blacks and whites, and there was definitely racism in his community, but he was not hostile in any way. He just said, you know, things used to be better and they've gotten worse, and he said, I think things can be better. And he said, you know, one thing that has struck him, he did not grow up being taught racism as far as he could tell. He was a preacher's kid, he said, and he was pretty naive about some of the black and white issues growing up, but he made a point that kind of really got my attention. I thought he was going to say that in order to get better, we're going to have to be taught better. But what he said was, to be racist, you have to be taught to be racist. That is still on my mind several days later and made me rethink a lot of things. He talked some about the scriptures, and by the end of it, I said, you know, I think I had a pretty good sermon today, but I think you out-preached me, and that gave him a good laugh. He said, I'm no preacher. I said, well, you've made some really amazing points. But what I wanted to share with you are a couple of things. Number one, sometimes we just awkwardly have to go ahead and cross the line like Jesus did. He just kept crossing the line to get the good news to people all around his community. We have to keep crossing the lines, even if it feels awkward at first. The second thing I want to tell you is this. The man sitting at the bar said to me, you know what, I really appreciate you speaking to me. No white person has come to me and asked me that question that you just asked me, which was, what is your perspective on all that is happening in our country related to black and white issues? He said, you know, this is exactly what needs to happen. That one-on-one, people to people, we need to start having a conversation and realize, as he put it, that we are all made in the image of God. What an amazing message I got from this man. And by the Lord just giving me the courage and me just trying to be obedient to go, therefore, and work on making disciples of all the ethnic groups. I believe God's going to send people into the white community as well and encourage us to become disciples of Jesus Christ. Well, that was the end of that conversation. My food was ready. You know what? I felt led to just go ahead and buy what he was having, buy his drink, and give the waitress a good tip. You know, that's another thing. I've heard from waitresses that Christians are sometimes the worst at tipping. I made sure to give a 20% tip, which was on top of me buying this man's drink. I'm not asking for a pat on the back. That's just another thing the Lord reminded me to do, to be a good witness, because I know the waitress at the register heard us talking about black and white relationships and about Jesus Christ. I want to keep encouraging our people, and many of our people are going out into their neighborhoods and saying things like, hey, can we meet you? And they are meeting people in their neighborhoods. There are more people walking outside, and there's a great opportunity. The fields truly are white for the harvest, as Jesus said, which he means the fields are ripe. So let's go out and make disciples of all the nations, and let's become disciples ourselves and go and keep crossing the lines, even if it's awkward, because oftentimes on the other end of crossing the line is going to be a blessing. I've received a blessing this week, and I believe many of you who are taking steps to be obedient to the Lord and love your neighbor as yourself, I believe you too are experiencing amazing blessings. All I want to say is keep up the great work in doing what Jesus said to do. Have a blessed day, and I hope the rest of your week goes wonderfully well, and that you yourselves will start thinking about ways that you can cross the line. Have a good day.